afternoon, everybody. Welcome in. I'll take the beginning of this Memorial Day pod and pause to recognize all of those lost in battle over the years. Thank you. Thank you for your ultimate sacrifice. And for all of you, hopefully you're having a meaningful Memorial weekend. Welcome in, Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football here on Memorial Day. We got a good one for you as Michigan is looking for some help at a position as they continue to take a look at the transfer portal and target one specific position. Also, the Wolverines are hoping on the basketball side to add a few players. They have 3 open scholarships. We will see where Olivier Nkamhoua is today, where he's been, and where he's going tonight. Big game for a former Wolverine, Duncan Robinson. We'll update how Duncan Robinson has been doing in the Eastern Conference Finals. He's been figuring pretty big in the mix as the Heat are up in Boston taking on the Celtics in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. But we start with a question to all of you out there that might be watching this show on this Memorial Day, and it's a simple question for you. I ask, what do you think of Jim Harbaugh, the head coach at Michigan? What do you think of him on this Memorial Day? Interested to hear what you have to say. Use the instant feedback and get your thoughts in that way on just what your feelings are and what you think of Jim Harbaugh. We're going to start with something that Jim Harbaugh is thinking of, and that is the transfer portal. And when it comes to the portal, Michigan is looking at the cornerback position, cornerback 2 for the Wolverines. And the latest player that Michigan has targeted in the transfer portal is a corner out of UMass named Josh Wallace. 4-year starter, 2-time captain. If you notice some of Michigan's players that they've gone after in the transfer portal, Ladarius Henderson, who's now on MGO Blue, is on the Michigan roster. Remember, he wasn't participating in spring, the grad transfer out of Arizona State. Henderson was a captain of the Sun Devils. Drake Nugent, Michigan center, captain out there at Stanford. Here's Josh Wallace, a 2-time captain at UMass, and somebody that Michigan is looking to add. And if it was just one corner, you'd say, okay, well, they really like this guy. But it's been a pattern in the offseason for Michigan. If you follow things closely, most of you do, you'll remember that Davison Igbinosun ended up going to Ohio State. Where was he at? Ole Miss, I think. Then you have Trey Amos, who was at Louisiana, a Ragin' Cajun. Trey Amos, Michigan was interested in Amos's services at corner in the transfer portal before ultimately Amos selected Alabama. So they have been in on corners. Amos, Igbinosun, and now Josh Wallace. We'll see if Michigan is able to score a corner in the transfer portal. And you just look at Michigan's roster, and I will do that in a second. As always, and on this Memorial Day, I tell you that this is one of the really great times of the year to join up with the Maize and Blue Review. Why would you say that? Well, you're a big Michigan fan, and you get into June and July, and a lot of people say it's the doldrums. There's not a lot of Michigan news to sink your teeth into. Well, on the Maize and Blue Review, we're offering up Plenty of morsels for you to dive into. Stories, features, recruiting, transfer portal news all day, all night. So join up with Amazing Blue Review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. So, before I get to the transfer portal, I wanted to see if I could put a depth chart up there for the corners. And I think I can. I can. There it is. So, Will Johnson, we're all sitting here. We all know about Will Johnson and his ability. He could be the best corner in the country. So, I was comparing Will Johnson after his freshman year favorably to Charles Woodson. Oh, Will Johnson, you feel pretty good. I'm just laughing, trying to say you feel pretty good about Will. You feel great about Will Johnson at the one corner. The other corner, there's no Jymon Green, there's no DJ Turner. And you had heard heading into spring, Jim Harbaugh was praising Amarian Walker. And then we saw Amarian Walker in the spring game. He struggled. And so then you're like, well, what about the other number one in the spring game? Amarian Walker wears number one. So does Jaden McBurrows. And, so you got McBurrows or Walker. If the season started this week, would it be Amarian Walker or would it be Jaden McBurrows? It would be one of those two guys, likely. If you were a betting person, if I was a betting person, I'd have put my money based on what I saw in the spring game. I'd put my money on McBurrows. There are a host of backups that are right there in the two deep. Keyshawn Harris, he's been in the program for a while. He's a senior. Miles Pollard, a sophomore, one of my favorites. And then the two incoming freshmen and Jair Hill, speaking of the spring game, he participated and he looked good. Jair Hill, Cam Calhoun, highly rated there as well. One of those guys could end up figuring in at nickel. If Michigan's going to a nickel, we know Mike Sainristil came over from the offensive side last year. In a pinch, could you have him at corner and have somebody else a nickel? Sure, but he played so well, Agent Zero, as a nickel matchup guy. You would think that they would want to keep him there, but he could move over and be that that corner too. A little bit different, you're lining up on the slot. I know it's you got slot corners and nickel corners, and then you have cornerback too. Wherever Sanders still fits in there, I think you'd like to slot him in there, right there at nickel. And then you have a couple of guys that you think about: Zeke Berry, Cody Jones. Both of those guys were standouts in the spring. Thinking about putting them in there at nickel, but clearly Harbaugh is looking towards the transfer portal for depth, for a starter, whatever he's looking for. We also look, the only other position that is getting like peppered in the transfer portal where Michigan's going after was kicker. Remember, Michigan got the Louisville transfer. They've got the Mississippi State transfer. They've got a freshman coming in and a preferred walk-on that are coming in. And, all of those guys throwing an awful lot at the place kicking position. You get Jake Moody and you feel so good about what Jake Moody did. Harbaugh's like, we'll just keep throwing. Hopefully one of these guys, is able to, and that's what you think as a fan as well. Hopefully one of those guys, Turner, the transfer from Louisville, Hollenbach, the transfer from Mississippi State, Samaha from River Rouge in Ann Arbor would be the incoming freshman, or CJM, Cordell Jones McNally, a preferred walk-on. Could be him. And, Jake Moody was a preferred walk-on. So when it comes down to kickers, keep them in mind because you remember about Jake Moody. So getting back to the question, I'm going to answer it myself. What do you think of Jim Harbaugh? Well, right now, Jim Harbaugh heading into his 9th season, I was thinking about him over this Memorial weekend. It hasn't always been for the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth year where you'd sit back and say, Jim Harbaugh's got it going like you just wouldn't believe. Everything that you could ask for. He's got Michigan sitting pretty because right now, Michigan, whoever you are watching this, Michigan is in a great position. The last 2 years have been fabulous. This year, the promise is, it could be a championship. They could win it all. That's the kind of team that they have. They've got the quarterback. The whatever you think of name, image, and likeness with this particular team and the players that they were able to retain because of name, image, and likeness, they hit a grand slam with this year's team with with name, image, and likeness that closes the talent gap with a team like Georgia or Alabama or Florida State or whoever it would be, Ohio State. If Michigan is able to get back to the college football playoff, the quarterback, the NLI, the transfer portal, which we see if you're a good team and things are looking up, there are players that are going to be in your own conference at the bottom half. They're going to be looking at anywhere else in the Power Five that they're not looking at, like one of the top teams or any other group of five that they would be looking at, saying, "Hey, we want to transfer up." Michigan is one of those destinations, and the Wolverines have used it. They've used it in recruiting. They have used it in the just recruiting where, remember, they were able to go out and get the kid from Notre Dame, Hillman, to add to this class. And they have gone out and they brought in the Magnificent Seven in the transfer portal, the aforementioned tackle, Ladarius Henderson, the aforementioned center, and Drake Nugent. Both of those guys could start on the offensive line. Tuttle at quarterback for some insurance behind J.J. McCarthy, and working with Davis Warren and Alex Orji. Who knows about the backup? Too close to call right now, but having an experienced player like Tuttle, a grad transfer at tight end, big time blocker, fits right into the Michigan tight end room. AJ Barner, part of the Magnificent Seven. And then over on the defensive side, maybe the biggest addition, Josiah Stewart at edge, came over from Coastal Carolina. And then right in the Big Ten out of Nebraska. Would it surprise anybody if he was starting at inside linebacker? Ernest Hausman, number 15 for Michigan. It wouldn't surprise me. And a lot of players, and then a lot of impact guys too. Stewart and Hausman could be impact players. I'm expecting that Drake Nugent would be starting, and as well as Olotimi played last year, that Nugent would slide right in there and Michigan wouldn't miss a beat. Fabulous. So when I think of Jim Harbaugh, he is just from all areas that you need it. The transfer portal, name, image, and likeness. We know what kind of coach he is, and then we knew that it was the one thing after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years that Michigan was losing to Ohio State, and more people are like, "This is ridiculous. Harbaugh can't figure it out. Can't figure out Ohio State. Can't get a quarterback." Those were two items that people brought up, criticisms of Harbaugh, and there was some truth in them. I mean, obviously he hadn't beat Ohio State. Obviously he was struggling to get the impact player at quarterback. He was, getting the quarterbacks, highly rated quarterbacks, transfer quarterbacks. It wasn't working. And, that mystified a lot of people, myself included. Actually, both of those items, when you think about it, what player would know more about the Ohio State rivalry than one who played in it? There was a captain, there was a quarterback that guaranteed a victory over the Buckeyes and then came through and did it. And then somebody who returned to Michigan, who would know the rivalry better and what it would take to get over the hump than Jim Harbaugh? That answer is nobody. And then as a former quarterback at Michigan, and then a quarterback in the NFL for all of those years, and then a coach from you go through Andrew Luck, and then you go through from what he was able to do at the pros with Kaepernick and Alex Smith, all of it. And you would think, Meg, there wouldn't be a better coach or a quarterback in all of the country than Jim Harbaugh. And yet, through 5 and 6 years, it was what almost cost him his job. And I just think about after the pandemic year, which was his 6th year, Michigan didn't play Ohio State. Michigan would have had their third string quarterback. They would have been a 30-point underdog against Ohio. I mean, they'd probably would have lost that game. 0-6. And maybe we should have remembered Harbaugh's nickname of Captain Comeback. That's when the chips are down and things aren't looking good. And I don't know, it's me. You could feel differently. I know people have argued with me, and that's fine. I think the majority of Michigan fans after year 6 were ready to move on. If they were in Ward Manuel's position, there would be a new football coach. It might have been Matt Campbell from Iowa State. He could have been the choice. I think he would have been the choice if Manuel would have moved on. But they didn't, and the rest is history. And then Harbaugh living up to his name as Captain Comeback, because the majority of fans not necessarily turning on him, just realizing that, hey, he's had his crack 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and it's just not working. When it comes down to Ohio State, move on. And Captain Comeback found it when the chips were down to get Michigan back. And now look at him. Look at him on this Memorial Day, May the 29th. Looking real good. And what do I think? Answering my question of the day of Jim Harbaugh, I think that Harbaugh has Michigan football positioned exactly like you would hope that they would be positioned if you're a Michigan fan. I don't know if you need to pinch yourself or whatever you need to do. You look at it. There's always things that you could, want more. And, you could talk about, I wish they would have won the championship game or the semifinal last year. And until we win a championship, then I'll be completely satisfied. Sure. I'm just talking about where you're thinking right now. And the team, where they've been and where they're going, just really good where, Jim Harbaugh has Michigan. That's what I think about him on this Memorial Day. There's Jason. Here's Hunter. Michigan has a real shot at a natty this year. They do. And why is that, Hunter? Talent. But you just look at the roster. You look at the quarterback. That's where it's going to start. They have a difference maker at quarterback. This offensive line looks more than solid. The running backs are stars. The offense overall, as you take a look at it, that looks like a championship offense. If it was prior to name, image, and likeness, Keegan and Zinter and Corum would be gone. One of those 2 guards, and yet all 3 of those guys are coming back. Those guys are worth, I don't know, 3 5-stars, 4 5-stars, considering they've done it on the field, 5 5-stars, however you would translate it. If you're like you just love, recruiting and you'd rather have had 5. Would I trade 5 5-stars from this past year for Blake Corum, for Trevor Keegan, for Zach Zinter? No. Would you? 5 5-stars. It's a lot. Future, you say, the future going to be pretty awesome. And Michigan does have some depth at guard. They do have some depth at running back. I would not do it, considering what I know about Corum and what I know about Zinter and Keegan, and for Michigan going for it this year. That's why you're talking about having a real shot at the national championship. What Michigan has been able to do with name, image, and likeness for this year, what they have been able to accomplish in the transfer portal, And then the team that they have coming back, Hunter, and the schedule that is there for them, you are right. Michigan has, uh, you should feel really good about Michigan being able to beat Ohio State because Michigan is at home. The tide has turned, as you have seen historically in this series. Michigan does have the returning quarterback. Ohio State does not. A lot of things to point to when it comes down to Michigan against Ohio State. Getting to the college football playoff, it's like last year. Michigan was favored to beat TCU. Thinking about not just getting there and being happy because, finally being able to get over the hump. Michigan's feeling like they're not crashing the party. I think you expect Michigan to be in the college football playoff and you expect them, and we don't know about the matchup, but today, Memorial Day, I feel like Michigan should beat whoever they line up with in the semifinal. And I feel like Michigan has a real good shot. I don't know if they'd be favored. I mean, how do we know that they would be favored in a championship game? Maybe they wouldn't, but getting to a championship game and being within a touchdown favorite, do I think that that's very, is it potentially possible as we sit here today talking about it? I do. Gary is sitting at the top of the world. Yeah, he is. Jim is sitting at the top of the world. Trevor McHugh says the man doesn't take days off. I think you're right. I think Jim Harbaugh on Memorial Day, I think maybe that he went out and cut the lawn. Here's me just speculating. Trevor, you probably know what he's done, with the things. This Trevor McHugh, the senior editor of the Maize and Blue Review, he likely knows what Jim Harbaugh has already done today and what he's doing for the rest of the day. But I would guess that Jim Harbaugh has mowed his lawn. Maybe he did that on Friday, getting ready for the weekend. But, I can see Jim Harbaugh grilling some burgers, getting some nice cold milk in the cooler, having some burgers, having some dogs. He seems like that he would celebrate Memorial Day like most of us. Mowing, grilling, and then tonight, watching some basketball. That's what I think about Jim Harbaugh. And if you're just joining us here on this Memorial Day, here is the question for you. I ask, what do you think of Jim Harbaugh? And I think Gary meant to say Jim is on top of the world because if he's talking about Kim, Noah Kim, the quarterback at Michigan State, he might be okay, but I don't think that anybody even, I don't know if Kim is thinking that he's sitting on the top of the world. Hunter, we are entering the golden ages of college football playoff with all of these guys wanting to come back when in previous years they wouldn't think twice about heading to the NFL. That's right, Hunter. Hunter looking at it as a 2-game season, Penn State and Ohio State. I think that's, I understand. Am I sitting here and going to say, let's not look past East Carolina, Hunter? We're going to take it one game at a time. No. I'm ready to look past not only East Carolina, UNLV, but BG. But do I want to look at the rest of the games? Do I think Michigan should beat Rutgers in their Big Ten home opener? I do. Do I think Matt Rule is an outstanding college football coach, the new head coach at Nebraska? I do. And they have the transfer quarterback from Georgia Tech, Sims. Could he provide some issue? Yes, he could. But I think that Michigan should be able to win that game, just like the following week up against Minnesota. I think the Wolverines should be able to go up there and win that one. Indiana, Michigan State, yeah. Those games, Michigan State, a rivalry game, but, I think Michigan's going to kill Michigan State this year. Purdue, new coach, Michigan at home. I feel good about that one. So, yeah, at Penn State, at Maryland, Ohio State. I'll give you, how about 3 games, Hunter? I feel like that those last 3, we could be, looking at it. Let's take some more feedback on what you think of Harbaugh. With the team we have coming back, we'll be practicing against players that are better than 80% of the opponents we'll face this year. Yeah. That sounds good to me. When it comes down to game planning and schemes, I'm going to have to take a timeout for just 1 second. I've got a dog barking in the background. I just notify the family to tell somebody, see if somebody can help. Let 1 second. And here we go. All right. Hang on a second, buddy. I made the call for you. All right, let's move on over to basketball. Olivier Nkamhoua. Nkamhoua is a player that Juwan Howard wants to add to next year's team as a transfer from Tennessee. Now, Olivier Nkamhoua looked like he was going to go to the pros and then didn't get invited to the NBA Combine, and he has been off, and now he has been taking some visits. He most recently went to West Virginia, Bob Huggins and West Virginia. You'd put them in the mix. He is coming to Michigan soon, sometime this week or this weekend, whatever, one of those two. In between, maybe today, I don't know, Memorial Day, maybe tomorrow, he is going to Manhattan to visit Kansas State. So West Virginia, Kansas State, and Michigan. If you're somebody that is looking for some odds, you are. I would put the odds at Michigan having a pretty decent shot compared to West Virginia and Kansas State. If it's coming down to promises with, and I don't know, with basketball, what it's going to come down to. But, Michigan has a good shot at landing him, and that would be some good news. I was thinking about, I just mentioned a name, image, and likeness. Just recently, Michigan had hired another, I don't know, without knowing the specific title, an NIL strategist. And he, business guy from Michigan, loves Michigan sports, and they're bringing him in, and this is going to be his department. And you think, well, what's he going to be doing? Hopefully, what he's going to be able to do, this new NIL strategist, is he's figuring out how to connect the dots with the transfer portal guys in basketball and then the 5 stars in football, where he's able to say, hey, look, this is what Michigan has. This is what you get when you're coming in here without us promising you anything. This is how you get that money in your pocket. This is what happens when you go to Michigan financially. This is what happens when you graduate Michigan. This is what happens when you're on campus with the NIL. You get all of this, and the other teams are saying, here's the cash in your pocket. I think that's what that strategist, however he's putting to, connecting the dots for the recruits, hopefully that's what he's doing. Because that's the only bridge that Michigan needs to build. And if they do that, watch out, everybody, because then the Wolverines will be on fire. In addition to Nkamhoua, there's the name from the guard from Toledo. Now, he's a point, and you can say, no, Michigan's not getting Dennis. Ray J is going to Utah. His trainer has a connection there. Baylor, they need some guard help. Illinois, they're hoping, things were looking really good with Illinois. Not Michigan, but Michigan, I would put this as an outside chance. It was a very quiet weekend on the Ray J. Dennis front, and that is good for Michigan because he had recently, I think, has been to Illinois and Utah, and then it looked like it was a done deal for Utah, but maybe not so fast. So Baylor and Michigan, and so until you see Ray J. Dennis connected to, hey, or maybe his Twitter account saying, I'm going to Baylor or I'm heading to Utah, you at least keep him in mind that there's a chance that Michigan might be able to get Ray J. Dennis. All right, one more thing, and let's get back because we do have the question of the day, and it is specific to Michigan football and specific to head coach Jim Harbaugh. What do you think of Jim Harbaugh? I'm going to answer the question again. I think Jim Harbaugh is doing a great job having Michigan positioned where they are right now. And that is one of the top teams in college football. You might say they're not positioned as well as Georgia. All right. You might say they're not as positioned as well as Alabama. Okay. Who else? I like their position. I like their position in the Big Ten. I like their position nationally. So I think Jim Harbaugh has this team right where you, the Michigan fan, want them in the mix for a national championship. One of the top 5 teams favored to win the national championship. After 2 outstanding seasons, Michigan looks like they have their best team now. Why do you say that? Look at the top end talent. J.J. McCarthy, season 2. We've been over Blake Corum and Keegan and Zinner. But then you want to go for some other game breakers on offense. How about the one-armed bandit, Donovan Edwards? There are not too many players at any position that are more talented than the Don. Colston Loveland. I mean, you should start ticking. I mean, I could do the same thing on defense. They've got a lot of top-end talent. I feel pretty good about it. I think you do as well. Let's take some more feedback. Antoine answering the question. I am very pleased with Jim Harbaugh. He has a setup for the present and the future. Antoine, right to the point, concise, one sentence, and you got it done. Although Antoine adds on. He likes what Michigan has done with the staff. And for the first time, the front office doesn't seem to be working against the team. Same thing with Santa Ono, the president. And he likes the fact that they took care of the staff. Yeah. Jason talking about JT was short. Yeah, it was close, Jason, but it sure, could have been. Tough one. It was an extremely close call that went against Michigan. Shadyville. See what else? What's up, Michiganders? I'm a bit hungover. Well, Jason, you know what a great hangover remedy is? Memorial Day. You don't have to do anything but sit back and recover. Here's Michigan Mark. I like Michigan Mark. He thought that Michigan blundered by not taking Harbaugh before he went to Stanford. And most pundits didn't realize he was close. Blame the O when it was the D all along. Losing Durkin was disastrous for him and Michigan. Losing, with Durkin, that hurt. Blame the O when it was the D. Yeah, I mean, there's up to season 6. Am I blaming more of the offense or the defense? It's tough because the quarterback position, Michigan was outplayed by their counterparts down at Ohio State at the quarterback position. But I would agree with you. When you're putting up 62, 50 some odd, I mean, so yeah, the defense. I feel like, you're right about that. Whoever came up with Harbaugh, keys, please. That's what my daughter is 17 now, but 8 years ago, she was like, "What's the big deal with Hairball?" I think a lot of kids probably went that direction, right, Jason? Shadyville is now weighing in on Harbaugh and what he thinks of him on this Memorial Day. Shadyville.03 says, Michigan is in a good position. They are currently at their peak. A national title is not possible until the pass game advances. We do not have national championship receivers. Yeah, Shadyville, I am going to disagree with you. You don't have to, like, I get it. You want to have game breakers at every position. You want to line up at every single position and say, Michigan has the other team covered. What it really comes down to is you need to have the team, quarterback. You do need talent. And I see what you're saying because the last 2 years when Michigan, certainly 2 years ago when they got up against Georgia, Georgia was a better team than them. They had a better defense. Michigan was not going to be able to line up and run it down Georgia's throat. They needed to have more of an explosive passing game, no doubt. Last year, it was coming on. And you know what? Michigan should have beat TCU. If JJ McCarthy doesn't throw 2 pick-sixes, if JJ McCarthy audibles out of the Philly special, any of those 3 things go a different way, I think Michigan wins. I think if they don't fumble at the goal line after Roman Wilson, a guy that you're saying is not a championship receiver, I think Roman Wilson is a championship receiver. I think you're completely, you're not giving the Michigan receivers their justice. But go back and look at what Roman Wilson did in that semifinal game. If they didn't screw up that call and Michigan didn't fumble, I think they win that game and they go. And I think as much as TCU had the chance and beat Michigan, I thought Michigan would have had that chance against Georgia last year. I think that you're not giving, when you look at this, Shadyville, you and other Michigan fans have fallen into the trap of you're listening to others or you're just into a narrative and you can't bust out of it. You don't win at every segment, and maybe some of these teams have. Maybe Georgia, maybe Alabama. They've got 5 stars at every position. Everybody's great, and you can look at it and say, okay, that team's going to win the championship. Michigan, the way they play football and by running the ball and dominating physically up front and the kind of defense that they have, they play all 3 phases of the game, and the quarterback that they have with the wide receivers. I expect the wide receivers to be much better this year with the quarterback on passes down the field. It took them a long time before they got there last year. Specifically, it took them to game 12. But I feel like game 12, game 13, game 14, that they broke the seal in the passing game. And I would say that, Shadyville, you are sleeping on the Michigan passing game. And anybody else who is down on it and is using this kind of language, a national title is not possible until the passing game advances. Well, we could argue it. I'm just saying that I think it's there already. And you saying that they do not have national championship receivers, I disagree with that. Roman Wilson is one of the best wide receivers in the country. I think Cornelius Johnson, along when you're putting in there, you're talking about receivers, I would put Colston Loveland in the mix there. I think when you got Loveland, Kojo, and Roman Wilson, those 3 right there, you are capable of winning a national championship. And I think that the passing game has already advanced. You just missed it because you're putting all of the other games in there. But I don't blame you, Shadyville. I think that there's probably a lot of podcasters, a lot of broadcasters, a lot of writers, and a lot of Michigan fans who all kind of hang out and hold hands together and just say things about Michigan, and they're just following what, it's just built up as a narrative. Whoever it's come from, whoever is saying it, they are wrong about that. And so too are you, Shadyville. Just come on over. Michigan has a national championship receivers, and a national title is possible because the passing game has already advanced. It just took too late in the season. You just missed it. Jason believes Jim is a very calculated individual. I think he knew and expressed how long it would take for him to actually turn this around. The COVID year didn't help him and bought him more time. Yeah, I think he's calculated. Somebody already mentioned the 2018 game, right? That's that one JT was short. Just think. If they would have won that game, they could have. That call could have, and many, think should have. I will too. They could have won that game. They could have started this out a little bit earlier. Could have started this thing out a little bit earlier. where Ohio State was in Michigan's head. That was a big part of it. So they needed to break through there. And that would have been nice, winning down there. I don't think that they would have given up 50 points, 60 points, after that. So I'm with you. I don't think I know Michigan would have won. I don't know what that's coming from. Sometimes here. Here's the coach. Yeah, the coach is wrong too. Jason talking about if Michigan played at 80% of the potential, they would have won the semifinal. Let me go back to Shadyville, who I poked some holes in his last feedback about the game-breaking wide receivers. He says, will any receivers get drafted in the first 3 rounds? They can continue to be run first, but they need NFL receivers to win on the big stage. Well, the answer to your question is maybe. Do you think that Roman Wilson can go out there, who had 25 catches, and can bump that up to 30, 40? Do you see where Jaden Reed from Michigan State was drafted? Where was he drafted? In the 2nd round? You know how tall Jaden Reed is? Same height as Roman Wilson. You know who scored more touchdowns last year? Take a look at where Roman Wilson is coming from. Roman Wilson can get drafted in the first 3 rounds, Shadyville. So I will look at it your way. I do think, you want me to make the prediction? Roman Wilson will get drafted in the first 3 rounds. That's the way you should be looking at it. Look at those 6 feet tall wide receivers like Jaden Reed, like the Jordan Addison, who went in the 1st round. Go ahead, take a look at some of the numbers. Wilson is faster than all of those guys. What I've seen from Roman Wilson when it comes down to not just separation, but route running and the ability to catch the ball, he's right there with those guys. I expect Roman Wilson to get drafted in the first 3 rounds. If you don't, you're looking at whoever you're listening to, whoever you're watching, whoever narrative you're following is just, they just don't have it. They're just wrong. That's okay. I mean, they're probably good people, especially if they're covering Michigan. You would hope that they would be, although some of them, a little, I don't know. AJ says, even though Michigan lost to TCU, it showed me that they had the ability to pass. They just didn't want to. That's what's frustrating me even more. You shouldn't be frustrated with anything, Antoine. Michigan's run up into the semifinal was a thing of beauty. Were you frustrated that Michigan was, they're beating their rivals like a drum? Were you real frustrated while Michigan was going undefeated? No, you were frustrated that they turned over the ball and lost to TCU and missed a shot at the national championship game. I'll buy that as a frustration. But frustrating because they passed, and then that earlier in the year that somehow they, like your argument that they should have been throwing the ball more. Look, they should have connected more. Andrell Anthony should have caught the ball at the 1-yard line for a touchdown against Illinois. J.J. McCarthy put the ball in as well as Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers when he threw that dart down to the 1 that Andrell Anthony let go through his hands. You start looking at some of the other passes, Roman Wilson, who had steps, and McCarthy just couldn't put the ball on him. How many times did he do that? 1, 2, 3, 4? How many? AJ? You're mad that they didn't connect on some of the plays to take the top off of the defense. I'd say I'll be a little frustrated with that part too. But I'm not frustrated with the results of going. I like to be entertained as well as the team wins. But when you go 12-0, 13-0, and then you're frustrated that Michigan didn't beat the hell out of TCU because they should have. I'm frustrated as well. OT on Memorial Day. Michigan's passing game is fine. JJ was a first-year starter. Jim runs a complex system. It's not Tennessee with half field reads and throws. OT, I'm expecting that McCarthy is going to get better with, yeah, like I was going to say it because it sounds like such a cliche. You get better after 1 year under your belt from year 1 to year 2. And I know he's a junior as a full-time starter, starting in game 2. You can expect growth at the quarterback position from JJ McCarthy. Good point. OT. Michigan doesn't have a wide receiver on any of the 4 preseason all Big Ten teams. Yeah, Shadyville, I haven't seen the preseason all Big Ten teams, but the let me just think about it with the top of my head here and go through it. On the first team, Ibukwe and Harrison Jr. are going to be the 2. They're on the All-American list. So the best that you're going to be able to do, because those guys are first-round picks. Those guys are top 10 picks. So now we're talking about what, second team? And so I have to go through the rest of the Big Ten. Do I think that Roman Wilson should be on the second team when I'm thinking through and scanning all of the wide receivers? I know Penn State doesn't have any. Michigan State certainly doesn't have any. Who's second team all Big Ten? You're talking about 4 preseason all Big Ten teams. Do they go 4 deep? I haven't seen that. I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I think that Wilson, if we're talking about second team preseason all Big Ten, I think he could easily be there. That could be there. People looking for recruiting, talking about recruiting. Ray J, we're hoping you end up in Michigan. Ray J Dennis has a hot take. OT is preferring the end of the season, all Big Ten teams. Shadyville likes Roman, but he doesn't have the production to support the confidence. No, he doesn't have the targets to support what you want with the production. Look, Shadyville, you can sleep on Roman Wilson. You don't like him a lot. If you had watched him last year, and if you threw the ball to him 50 times, he would score double-digit touchdowns, guaranteed. He had 25 catches last year and still scored a half dozen touchdowns. Throw him the ball, hand him the ball. I think that, 30, 40, double-digit touchdowns, 40 catches is right in his wheelhouse. Michigan will be targeting him more. I mean, there's a lot of targets when you think about Schoonmaker and Ronnie Bell, the amount of targets and catches that those guys had. Roman Wilson is going to get a lot more targets. So, yeah, this should say, I kind of like Roman, but I just don't see enough targets to, be confident in him. And that could be fine. And look, we all look at things different ways. And what I'm just telling you is that, Roman Wilson is a star. And he is underrated by Shadyville and other Michigan fans. And I don't really know, Shadyville, where maybe you were putting up the all preseason Big Ten teams, which I haven't seen. Or, I don't know who you're a follower of. If you're a loyal follower of this blogger or this particular Michigan guy, and they sit there and talk about, Michigan just doesn't have the receipt. Well, then you're going to believe that. You tell whoever wrote that or said that they don't know what they're talking about, or that they need to evolve a little bit in their prognostication when it comes to football. You don't just sit around looking at the numbers. You don't just sit around looking at the recruiting rankings. Expand a little bit. Take a look at it. Take a shot. Argue it with me. Jason, who's big into recruiting, is talking about Gatlin Bear. and some of his track times, and he's looked at the tape. Well, does a five-star wide receiver is a five-star wide receiver going to come into Michigan? I don't know. Maybe. But I don't think he's going to commit anytime soon. I wouldn't if I was a five-star wide receiver. If I was a five-star wide receiver, I would wait to this year. And when I saw Roman Wilson like taking the top off of the defense repeatedly when he scores 3-4 touchdowns, the first 2 or 3 games, and then everybody's like, "Whoa, Roman Wilson's a star. He's an absolute game breaker." And then you see in Michigan's like, "Wow, yeah, they run the ball a lot because." You know what? They've got really good running backs and a real physical offensive line. But now we should have remembered, we should have listened that, the passing game clicked late in the season last year. And now look at it. And then somebody like Bear might be like, okay, I'll go to Michigan now. They're connecting on their downfield passes. But I don't think that's going to happen until, the season is over. So I don't know what this guy's timeline. Hopefully this timeline is going to be, after his high school season, which would get, at least Michigan into November. Because then you at least have an opportunity to see this team, because a lot of people like Shadyville and others are like, Michigan, they somehow it's like they're running a wishbone or something from the 70s, or they're like Georgia Tech. They're running the triple option. They don't throw the ball to the wide receivers. Ray J is talking about Tyler Morris could end up surprising a lot of people. Kojo and Roman will step it up, but neither of them have top 3-round NFL talent. Disagree with that. Roman has been hurt 2 years in a row. You act like he was healthy all year and didn't produce. He was banged up a little bit too. AJ coming back and saying Michigan has the ability. They just chose not to pass. I disagree with that. I disagree with you and Shadyville. That's all right. Look at, AJ and Shadyville. Most of the people out there are like, oh yeah, these guys know what they're talking about. That's what so-and-so said. That's the Michigan narrative. You guys, I don't blame you for following along the Michigan narrative. And you got guys probably that have covered Michigan for 20 or 30 years that are over there like, Michigan doesn't really pass the ball. I don't know, whatever, however they say it, however they write it, however they talk. And look, I get it. Like, you have to look at it. You can't just look at it and sit back and say, oh, Michigan. They are steamrolling everybody. Look at them. Look at the offense. Look at the offensive line. Look at the running backs. There's got to be something. In the passing game, I get that. Saying that you want to see a more explosive passing game, I think you're going to get it. Based on what? Second year of JJ. The team hitting their stride and clicking with the wide receivers and the quarterback in the 12th game of the season last year, and game 13 and game 14. It wasn't just a one-game thing. I think that you will see that carry over into this season. Roman Wilson, the speed, I think that, sometimes with diminutive wide receivers, it happens. The fan base kind of looks at him and they bake in the recruiting. And because he wasn't a 5-star or a top 4-star, you look at it and you're like, I want a big wide receiver that's fast. Or you look at the Ohio State wide receivers and you say, Michigan needs those kind of receivers. Yeah, that would be real nice to be able to get 5 stars at every position and guys that are game breakers. But I don't know what I think I know the answer to AJ and to Shadyville. Would you trade Roman Wilson for a 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school, a 23 that would be coming in this year? Would you do that? I would not. I would take Roman Wilson. And I have the standing bet now with you and others that Wilson will be a top, either a first, second, or third round pick. And I think it'll become apparent really quick too. And I'll be able to I'll be able to tell everybody, hey, I told you that was coming in the summer. Mm-mm. Shadyville sees that CJ is third team. Where? With who? I don't know. Is it Phil Steele that did this? Okay, there's the two top guys. Isaiah Williams from Illinois. All right, he's pretty good. Dyke from Wisconsin. Autumn Bell. Minnesota's got two wide receivers. Or is that just one? That's just one. Keandre Lambert Smith. No. Who put the list together? Shadyville. I don't know. Who put their first and second and third team wide receivers together? Is that your preseason? I disagree with it. Or I disagree whoever put that together. Now, if you're telling me that there was some kind of assembled media that did that, well, then I'll take a look at it a little bit closer. But I just think that you're kind of you're taking whoever did that list and you're basing your things, which I understand, but Athlon, yeah, I'm going to disagree with Athlon there. They have missed the boat on Roman Wilson. Like, I think there's a couple players that get missed on. Roman Wilson on the offensive side. I think Rod Moore and Mike Sainristil on the defensive side are undervalued and underrated by Athlon and others. I think those guys are more stars than honorable mention, in the Big Ten at corner or safety or at wide receiver. Okay, I've got one other thing for you, and it happens tonight. And if you have been watching the Eastern Conference Finals, you know that there's a Game 7 tonight in Boston. And you might feel like, I think everybody feels that Miami has missed their chance to pull the upset as the number 8 seed and beat the Boston Celtics and get to the NBA Finals. I found Game 6 fascinating for Duncan Robinson, the former Wolverine. If you watch the game, he had two shots late where it felt like if he made either of them that Miami was going to win that game and go to the NBA Finals. Obviously, as it turned out, they ended up getting the lead even later than that. And then, you had the putback, crazy putback by the Celtics to get them to a Game 7. So, it's hard for me to argue and say that they would have been for sure in the finals. But man, they were. You couldn't have asked for anything more. Duncan Robinson was out there, and the first one, he got it passed to him, and nobody was around him. He looked down at his feet. He was kind of feeling the laces, and then he even said, the first one, he couldn't believe how much time I had. I checked the wind and everything. Obviously, you want to get those back. He was all juiced up and missed them long. Duncan Robinson in this Eastern Conference Finals, you look Game 2, he had 15 points, 22 points in Game 3, only 2 points in Game 4, but he's come back 18 points in Game 5, and then the other night had Saturday night 13 points, but then missed both of those threes. What I have found, and if you watch Miami, they get talked about all of their from Strus and all these guys are amazing undrafted free agents, and then it's Jimmy Butler, and then Bam Adebayo, and then these like 4 undrafted free agents, including a Duncan Robinson that is out there and that is have become big time players for Eric Spoelstra. But you're watching the second half and even into the fourth quarter with the NBA Finals on the line. They were running plays. They were just like, hey, Duncan Robinson's open. They were running plays for him. And Duncan Robinson, they weren't just running plays like some like, hey, shoot a three. They were giving it to him on the move, and he was driving to the basket, hitting layups. He's been passing the ball as he's been driving. He's been throwing alley-oops. I mean, he's taken his game. And Duncan Robinson, he didn't have a very good regular season. There's this, he barely averaged over 6 points in the regular season, and you just look at him, And most people, and even last year, they were looking at his contracts. This is one of the worst contracts in the NBA. And then he just had those golden opportunities in Game 6. He's played well in the majority of these games for the Miami Heat, and it would be nice. It would be cool to see the Duncan Robinson and the Heat. I would love to see Duncan Robinson have another opportunity with the game on the line, with a three-pointer, and him having an opportunity to send the Miami Heat to the finals. Felt like he had two of those opportunities in Game 6. I'd like to see him have one in Game 7 tonight. Good luck, because just like before the series, when ESPN had Boston as a 97% chance of winning the series, and then no team has come back from 3-0. Nobody thinks that Miami is going to win this game tonight. I would love to see the Heat do it tonight. All right, let's go and look back through some of the feedback. Shadyville has been busy today. He was listening to an Ohio State podcast. They had some pretty interesting info. If you take out quarterback and wide receiver recruiting, Michigan and Ohio State are basically equal. Yeah, well, if they say about your, if you didn't have this, you would be your aunt or something like. But still, that's it. Jason's a big fan of basketball, and although that emoji, is that a wiping your nose emoji or a yawning emoji? Yeah, Jason, I'm sorry. I know you're more. Yeah, Jason, aren't you're the football hockey guy? So you'll be watching Game 6 with the Stars and the Knights this evening. So you'll there's Glendenning, right? You'll be fired up about that. I think people are now answering questions back and forth to one another about recruiting. OT is holding out hope. Yeah, I am too. Yeah, that's what I thought. You were yawning. Look, you're going to be watching Glendenning and the boys tonight, seeing if they could force a Game 7, right? Is it a choke if you're an 8 seed and you're up 3-0? Yeah, kind of, since 150 of them came out and you were the one. I'm not going to be able to argue that it's not a choke. Richard, great to see you. Talk to you on Wednesday. I will see you on the Maize and Blue review tomorrow. Yeah, Jason, I'm with you. I don't disagree. Antoine sometimes thinks I disagree with everything that he puts up there. No, I don't disagree with that. Tomorrow, I think right now I'm going to be posting about Jim Harbaugh on the Maize and Blue review. And then we're back Wednesday with Jim Scarcelli. Everybody have a meaningful rest of your Memorial Day. Take care. So long. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Give us a 5-star review when you're listening to that podcast. Put a comment down there. That's what makes this show go and makes us think about, hey, maybe we'll go every day. See you later. OJ, good to see you. Have fun on the rewatch. Re-listen.